Hi, I'm Diana, and I'm sitting here with managing partner Sandra Ziskind and lawyer Brandon Handelman. And on today's episode, we're going to be discussing Diamond & Diamond's class action claims against many universities across Canada regarding all the anti-Semitism that's been happening and what we're doing to help them, essentially.
We've done claims on discrimination time and time again. We've done claims for racialized minorities and that they've been experienced in the school boards and universities. So it was a natural progression for us to do it for the anti-Semitism that we see, a huge rise in the anti-Semitism on campus. But to be clear, and Brandon, you know this as well, we've discussed it many times, the massacre of October 7th was an impetus to what occurred. The anti-Semitism has been systematic and has been present there for decades.
100%. This is something that has existed back when I went to university. I think when my parents at least went to university, and something that is in the back of all of our minds as parents or as students in Canada, and something that we don't try to think about often, but something that rears its head.
I understand what you're saying. You know, when I started the York University lawsuit, and we started with York University as the first first school we targeted, I didn't realize at the time the history and how it was really shocking and how, I mean, I know, Diana, you were answering a lot of the calls at the time, and weren't you surprised at the fact that this has been going on this long?
Yeah. We've had clients, I've spoken to some clients that have called and they were students in 2000 or 1998, or they're alumni there, and their stories were just similar. They were just similar to those that are experiencing it now after October 7th. So it's kind of heartbreaking. It's shocking to me, actually, that was happening the whole time.
I think anyone who's grown up in the GTA over the past 20, 25 years who, reads the news infrequently has, memories of or articles of incidents happening at York. I think it's unfortunately been labeled as one of those schools that I wouldn't say is unsafe for Jews, but definitely something that or a place where a Jewish student sort of has to keep their eyes open.
Yeah. Well, and there's incidents of, and this is pre-October 7th of this year, of students having to lock themselves in their Hillel chapter while people are banging on the door, crying out for their death and destruction. And what's insane to me is that it's taken this long for the lawsuit to come about. I mean, I'm thrilled that we are spearheading this and we're doing this very important initiative because change needs to occur immediately. Mm-hmm. But it's amazing to me, and I think you both would agree that it's somehow calling for the death and destruction of Jewish students coached in anti-Zionism has allowed this prevalent anti-Semitism to go on for so long. Right. Whereas if this was any other minority in any other setting, if they were advocating for the death and destruction of that minority, that would have been shut down immediately. I'm not even Jewish, and I would agree to that. I think that, I don't know, I attended York myself. About the other universities, we can get to that in a second, but for the most part, it's just, because I've taken the calls since we did the class action claim, it's just that you hear the chants that people are saying to them, and then they're cornering them with the posters and whatever they're saying. And it's not only what they're saying or how they have to lock themselves in a room. It's literally like the posters that they're saying with that say very aggressive anti-Semitic things. And it's like, it's terrifying to hear those stories. And it's just that it's because it's against a certain group. But if it was anyone else, like, you couldn't go around pulling out based off of race or anything of that nature, because that would be shut down immediately against sexual orientation, race, any of those things. But for some reason, and I've heard many stories from students that called that even their professors are propagating that type of rhetoric with these students all the time.
Look, the truth is, university should be a safe space for every type of individual, any religious background, any ethnicity, any race. And it should be a place where, as long as, you pay your tuition, you should be showing up and be entitled to, being provided with the education that you're paying for.
And to be clear, you should also be able to have a intellectual discussion about the political state of Israel
without being fearful of your safety.
That's one thing
Correct.
I want to talk about. Like, how does is there a safe way for two students on opposing sides to have that conversation and have that political discourse, if you, like you said, in a university setting, right? Because that's where you learn, you explore new ideas, you write papers, you do masters, you explore different topics. What is there a safe way to do that?
I think the agenda right now at most institutions of higher learning, and that's not only in Canada, but as well as in the United States, there's not this balanced discussion. It is the extreme of Israel should not exist.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people should not exist. And then we're allowing chances such as the river to the sea, which is the most offensive. How you can allow that chant on a campus is beyond me. You're basically advocating for the genocide of people, saying river to the sea. And then you're spouting off words that are factually incorrect, just incorrect buzzwords such as Israel's perpetrating a genocide. Israel's a colonialist country.
Right.
And
I've seen a lot of that.
And we're going backwards from where we're supposed to be evolving to. We're supposed to be evolving to a peaceful two-state solution. That's where we're supposed to go. But now it's gone so far backwards that they're saying, no. Israel doesn't belong there should be no Jewish state.
Yeah.
The Jews don't deserve a state. They don't deserve to exist. They don't deserve to live. And that's where the universities need to step in. The parameters of what a two-state solution should look like, the parameters of what a peace deal should look like, that is all fodder for intellectual conversation. And that should be discussed and debated in an intellectual way.
I think it's lacking, and it's hiding under the guise of free speech when really you're bordering on hate speech. And I don't know if these universities know
it's hate speech.
That's what I mean. But that's what I mean. It's just that I think these universities are using it in Canada and in the US. They're using it as under the free speech, under the guise of free speech, when really, if you think about it, saying things like from the river to the sea, or a lot of the posters that we've seen drawn out, and it's just how do you argue something like that with them? Like, what would you say?
You can't. And there's no semblance of reasonableness. You know, it's interesting. We have, I have a employee that works for us, and I won't mention her name, but she's of Palestinian descent. And, we don't agree on the politics of the region, nor do we have to agree because we live in Canada in a civilized country. But the thing we said to each other was, I'm sorry for your family. Yeah. And she said, I'm sorry for your family.
Yeah.
And we said, we pray for everybody's children. And that was our common ground to start off a conversation. Just say, listen, we don't have to agree. Mm-hmm. We don't have to agree on the politics of the region, but we can agree that we don't want the death and destruction of each other and of each other's children. And if you start from that premise and then move forward, that's a starting point. But when you are looking at hostages posters and ripping them off the wall and saying that this is Israeli propaganda, that's what I love better than anything about this whole discussion, is that it's Israeli propaganda as the hostages.
Right.
And I would like to know then who was being returned.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many, I think that there's people that maybe are failing to educate themselves fully on the things so that you can say, okay, you have your points, I have my points, instead of I hate you and you hate me and this is the way things need to be.
But the university has an obligation. They have a code of conduct, and they have an obligation to impose that code of conduct in the same way they would for everyone. So whether it's Jewish students, whether it's Black students, whether it's Chinese students, everybody deserves the same rights. And right now what's happening is because we're cloaking things under anti-Zionism, they are now letting them get away with things they would not let for any other, and it's unacceptable. So this lawsuit that we've started not only against York, but against TMU, Queens, against UBC, and there's more to come. We're partnering with Concordia as well, is saying, you have a duty to uphold your own code of conduct that you put in.
Correct.
And you cannot willy-nilly just impose it where you think it's correct.
So the protection of the students as well across the board. Like, I mean, how can you, it's interesting. We have the historical stuff with York, like that we know that was predating to 1998. With UBC and Queens and what have you, have you found that there's also historical issues?
Oh yeah, in every school we've issued against, there's been a historical background, because the premise of the lawsuit is not that this happened just magically with October 7th. The premise of the lawsuit is they fostered this environment for so many years, allowing it to happen, so that when it did happen, now all of a sudden they're saying, well, we didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, of course you knew.
No, that's not true. That's not true. They knew.
Of course they knew.
I have two sisters, one older than me, graduated Concordia in the early 2000s. She experienced this type of hate. I have a younger sister who graduated Queen's maybe 5-6 years ago. She also experienced this type of hate.
Of course.
So these universities, by and large, have failed the students, Jewish students.
Yes.
Not to say they haven't failed other ethnicities or minorities or groups, but, because we're here, that's what we're talking about today. By and large, these Jewish students have been let down by these institutions that should have been neutral, should have stayed sort of in the center of all this, and have clearly sided with, that's not the Jewish side, which is fine. You're entitled to your opinion, but
we've gone so far.
Protect everybody.
Yeah,
equally.
we've gone so far to the left on this specific issue that it's almost fallen over to the point where you can't have a dialogued, a real dialogue, and hate speech has been allowed on campus. I mean, that's the problem. Right. We've allowed hate speech. I was listening to Stephen Harper speak last night, and, he was talking about, when he was in power, he had some very strong hate laws that were then repealed by Trudeau. And he was saying the reason we had this is specifically for these reasons. Yeah. So that this sort of, nobody can hide behind freedom of speech when it is hate speech, because we all know that all of the major Holocausts in the world, all of the major things that happened where millions of people died or thousands of people died started with the speech. You start with the rhetoric. Yeah. You start with painting people a certain way.
Because then some people sit there and be like, oh, maybe he is right
maybe
about the Jews.
Maybe they are like that.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about Rwanda, whether we're talking about the Armenian genocide, whether we're talking about how the Japanese soldiers were conditioned to go into China during World War II. All of these started with a brainwashing and a discussion about how that species or person is subhuman in some way. And that way makes it easier when you have to kill them.
Wasn't there somebody that did a charter challenge because he wanted to wear KKK on his badge, and the Supreme Court was like, no, you can't do that because that falls under hate speech. Isn't that
correct?
That's a hate speech thing, right? That there's a difference between the two. And I don't think the universities really know what the definition of that is.
And it gets sort of spirals out of control this day of age with social media.
Oh, God.
Popular.
Don't get me started on that.
So there's that whole TikTok generation. We saw what happened with Bin Laden's letter a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
They don't understand it. They just read it out loud.
Yes.
I shouldn't be laughing. It's horrible, but it's
horrifying.
It's comedic.
It can only be funny because it's so insane that these people are promoting Bin Laden as some sort of prophet. I mean, this is where we've come to in this world, and where we've come to also is a very scary place, because we know what's happening. We know that these are Iran-backed attacks. This is all being funded and put forward by Iran. A horrible, unstable, I hate to use the word government, but a government who's hell-bent on the destruction of the West and everything that is Western, who is aligning with Russia, who is aligning with China. So we as the West have an obligation and a duty to not only to oppose it, but to stand up very loudly and oppose it, because that's what's happening in the world. Yeah. This is Iran, Russia, and China. And then when China goes and invades Taiwan, and they go in and do it, because that's what's going to happen, my friends, and nobody stands up and does what we need to do, and doesn't say that, no, this is where we're drawing the line, then we're all in real problems. Yeah. We're in real problems.
What are they going to do? Blame the Jews for that one too?
Yes.
Right. For everything. But I got to say, like this, it's because of all the history that we like, the story of your sisters and people like the clients that have been calling us. What happened on October 7th really sparked that conversation. And it was almost, I think you guys had to like backdate to say, okay, we're going to do it based off of what just happened. And then people are calling you saying, this has been happening to me since this law. And you're like, whoa. Okay, that
correct.
Now we have to really explore the historical issues within these universities and the way they systemically are just allowing it to happen through and through.
Well, we hope that the conclusion will be that we have some good changes going forward.
You know what? I got to say, from what I've heard when people call, they're super thankful. I know, Sandra, you've gone to a ton of events and everybody's very thankful for what you've been doing. Brendan, are you getting any feedback?
I get emails, I get calls, I run into people, friends of mine's parents. Brandon, you're a diamond and diamond. Thanks for sticking up for us. This is amazing. Go after them all.
I think
it makes me obviously proud to be here as part of the firm, but also I think it's an important role to speak out against this. Something that people want to do, maybe they're afraid to do.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
It needs to be done clearly.
Yeah. It's really brought that up for us. So just thank you, Sandra, for for getting that going and moving that forward. If anyone out there has been a victim of any of the universities that we name, that's York University, Queen's University, TMU, UBC, or Concordia, please feel free to call us. Our class actions department is ready to help you and listen to your stories and get your feedback.
Or any other university.
Any other university.
There's more coming.
We know that there's more. We know that there's no more out there. And again, this is for anyone who's out there thinking that this is a monetary issue. It's really not. It's really, at the end of the day, it's not about the money. It's about, let's see what kind of change can actually be made for future students, for future Jewish students, so they don't have to keep going through this, because we know that this is not the end, right? No. There's going to be wars. There's going to be issues about this topic for years to come, the issue of Israel and Palestine, all of that. So just contact us, 1-800-567-HURT. Ask to speak to anyone in the class actions department, and we're here to help.
Thanks, Diana.
Thanks, guys.